Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about parenting the overachiever or parenting the perfectionist. It is such a challenge. I mean, there's like a kind of a good part about it because, they do what you ask and they make you look great. And then there is the dark side of it, of when in your home they break down and things aren't going the way that they want. And you are left sort of dealing with the fallout of that, which is no longer really pleasurable or pleasing. And we're not taught, like, how do we support? So many parents are dealing with the other end of the scale, is how do I motivate my teen? How do I get my teen to care? How do I get and I don't think we talked often enough about how to parent the perfectionist, how to parent the overachiever in a way that is supportive to them and giving them what they are requiring. So I'm going to talk about that in detail today. I'm going to give you some tips and also some personal experience because I was the perfectionist and overachiever. So today's IGTV YouTube video is going to be flavored with some of my own personal experience and my thoughts and experience of having been that teenager. Welcome. If you're watching on Instagram, give me a follow. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, and I've been working with parents of teens for 16 years. Last week, 16 years now to help parents end the painful disconnection, emotional blow-ups, and stressful silences of parenting teens, because there's so little, we're not even taught like how to keep a child alive for 30 days, let alone how to raise a teen. And now we're in an extremely difficult time of year. I need to stop touching my hair. What is it with my hands and my hair? Okay, I'm just gonna, there. It's done. Hands down, stop touching. Okay. Can you tell I'm nervous? I don't know, I'm nervous. So I think we need to have more information on and stop assuming that because we are parenting a high achiever or a perfectionist that we're not dealing with any specific, issues with all the parents who are on the other end of the scale trying to motivate their teen. So let's jump into this. Feel free to post your comments and your questions below. I would love to hear from you. And again, tap the follow on Instagram and the subscribe on YouTube. Okay. So here is where here's where I want to go with this first, is I want to define for you high achieving and perfectionism are not necessarily the same thing, okay? They are not necessarily the same thing. One is a healthy striving toward growth and bettering oneself. The other is an unhealthy, fear-driven energy towards something which is unachievable. Okay, so let's be clear on high achieving and perfectionism. And how do you determine? Well, it's really only from your teenager would be the only one who really knows, but I'm willing to bet a lot of money that there would be signs where you would also be able to determine which side of that scale your teenager is sitting on, the overachiever, the high achiever, or the perfectionist, okay? So they're not necessarily the same thing. That's why I want to talk about them today so we can create that distinction. Okay, so I've got some resource information here that I want to refer to. So again, 2 parts, they're not in the same camp. For young people right now, for youth right now, comparison is 24/7 on their phones, and social media is a huge part of that. The cell phone is actually like a 24/7 comparison device that I can tell you that they come up on the losing end pretty much every time. And unfortunately, because teenagers use their cell phones and social media to connect, so it is a real part of viable relationships these days, then they are also inherently subject to a lot of this comparison, body image, experience, who's doing what, how are they doing it, all the fake stuff. I mean, come on, you guys, I went to seminars 14 years ago about social media, like back when Facebook and Twitter were around, and they could already prove that 67% of what was online was fake. It was fake. It was not authentic or real. So, yeah, teenagers don't know that. They don't have the context for that. And yes, you can tell them till you're blue in the face, but that's not the point. Okay, so let's move to another thing. I also wanted to just say that when I was growing up, the comparison device was beauty magazines. So things like Vogue or Allure or heck, even Canadian Living, because I'm in Canada, Maclean's, People Magazine. I loved reading magazines. I loved it. And there were already studies when I was a teenager that proved that when particularly female, there was this for men as too, but it was significantly lower, particularly females read or were in the visual vicinity of beauty magazines or kind of mass marketing magazines, that within like 5 minutes, their self-esteem or their sense of like feeling about themselves dropped 83% after 5 minutes. Now, a magazine, you had to like see, or you had to like pick it up and read it. A phone is in our teenager's face 24/7. Yep, I'm Canadian. 24/7. So just think of the impact of that, okay? Is that when I was a teen, the current stat was that beauty magazines lowered our self-esteem something like 83% after 5 minutes. Now put that in context of having a phone in your face 24/7, okay? So it's not helping our teenagers' self-esteem. I'm not against the phone entirely because, again, it is how teenagers are connecting. I do believe that healthy limits are a good thing. Healthy limitations to social media and phones in general is a good thing. Complete restrictive is not healthy. It increases sense of anxiety, isolation, loneliness, depression. So I don't recommend that. And I also am not a fan of anything invasive where you are reading all of your teenager's private life. Don't recommend that either. Okay, so let's move forward. So perfectionism, perfectionism has been linked to rates of higher anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and things that Dr. Brené Brown calls life paralysis. So they're all opportunities where we're so hyper-focused on being perfect that we miss out often on the world around, okay? Perfectionism is not self-improvement. And this is why I want to talk about, you have a high achiever and you have a perfectionist. So high achieving is an approach goal. There's two kinds of goals. Sorry, I got to give you a little bit of background here. There's two kinds of goals. An approach goal is often considered something that is healthy because we are moving toward something. There is something motivating that I am moving toward for growth, learning, self-improvement, competitiveness, challenging myself in a healthy manner, okay? So that's an approach goal. An avoidance goal is something that I am upset about, can't be with, don't know how to be around, and I want to get the heck away from that. So I'm moving away from it. Now, the science behind this, as it relates to high achieving and perfectionism, is often in the diet industry. And this has been researched like decades ago in the diet industry, is that a lot of mass marketing is playing on your desire to move away from pain. Because our brains are wired to move away from pain, okay? So, but mass marketing plays on your fear and what you want to move away from. But science has shown that avoidance goals, they might get you motivated and they might get you started, but they are not sustainable because your brain is only focusing on what it doesn't want. What science has proven is that acknowledgement of what you want to move away from is healthy, but an approach goal is something that helps to build healthy, more sustainable habits, coping strategies. It challenges our mindset, and it actually is growth oriented. So an approach goal is more likely to have a positive impact. So high achievers will use an approach goal. Like, this is my next goal. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I want to get done. This is what I want to learn. This is who I want to be. A perfectionist is using avoidance goals. They can't be with things. So they're overachieving. They're not a high achiever now. They're overachieving to get the heck away from what they can't be with and what is painful. I hope that's a clear distinction for you. Okay. So perfectionism is not self-improvement. It is perfectionism at its core. Okay. And this is Dr. Brené Brown's quote, not mine. Perfectionism is not self-improvement. Perfection is at its core about trying to earn approval. And having walked in those shoes and lived it most of my life, I would say that's a hell yeah. Most perfectionists grew up being praised for achievement and performance. Now, here, this is the kicker. You and I were raised, we have plenty of science now to prove that previous parenting generations raised their children in performative environments because we'd come out of wars and famine and, great strife. And so parents were told to raise children who were high achievers because at that time it was considered higher moral ground to have a high achiever. You were a better parent and a better person if you raised a high achiever, because that high achiever also, by the way, this is getting deep into the science, but with a strong bent on extroversion, because if they were an introvert, well, they weren't just going to go anywhere in life. Yes, this is actually documented. This is true. So you wanted to raise a high achiever who was an extrovert because they were going to go further in life, because the world exalted that kind of person and you were just more righteous and more moral. And so they got better grades. They were self-advocating, they spoke up, and they got better jobs, yada, yada, yada. Is that still true? Not as much. But when we were raised in that kind of performative environment, it's quite normal that we would also raise children in performative environments because it's what we know. It's just what we know. That's why, okay? No judgment here. Let's just create understanding. Because when we have a greater understanding, we can make a better informed decision on what is the next best step for you and your teen, okay? So let's just take the judgment off here. So perfectionism is both environmental, but it is also personality style, as is high achievers. It is environment. It is also inherent personality style, okay? So again, this isn't about blamey shamey, so let's not do that. Okay, so most perfectionists grew up being praised for achievement or performance, and somewhere along the way, they adopted a dangerous and debilitating belief system that says, I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. Please perform perfectly. That's a quote from Dr. Brené Brown. Does that resonate with you? I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. I need to please, I need to perform, I need to be perfect. To earn your parents or those that you held in high regard around you, to earn their love and approval, okay? So that leads to perfectionism. That is not a would not be a belief system of a high achiever. Okay? Distinction there. All right, so researchers are showing that teenagers are grappling with perfectionism more than ever because of social media, because it encourages constant comparison, which I already addressed, okay? So there is environmental instability as well, and this I want to point to. So if your world is chaotic, if your teenager believes that their world is chaotic, and I don't care if you agree with them, this is perception is reality, and their reality is their truth. So no point in arguing this, okay? If their world is chaotic in their minds, as in they feel like there's no calm or place where they can create calm, so they feel somewhat powerless to create calm, either themselves or because of environmental reasons, okay? Then they make up a story. If their life were more perfect, then they would be able to deal with the unpredictability, okay? A couple more things I want to point to, and then I'm going to tell you a bit of a story. So researchers are calling perfectionism a significant public health concern that urgently requires sustained prevention and intervention efforts. Because young perfectionists are particularly at risk because the patterns of thinking solidify during adolescence. Okay, so here's the difference for me. I was raised, and I've said this before, was raised in a very performative environment, which was very normal for parenting of the time, okay? My parents were very high achievers. My mom was like, oh my gosh, like super friendly, outgoing, service-oriented, smart, very community-oriented. My dad was, skipped 3 grades. He was extremely intelligent, leader in organizations and things like that. So high achievers. However, they were high achievers, but they were raised in performative environments. Okay, so you can have both. You can have both. So I was raised in an environment where there was an expectation of, in my experience as an adolescent or as a child, okay, so of course I didn't have the full perspective. I'm simply sharing what I experienced, is that I experienced extreme shame and condemnation when I was less than perfect. Now that meant how I spoke to my parents, which of course I was raw, unfiltered, and not cool. How I spoke to my parents' friends, which sometimes I didn't get right. How I spoke to my grandparents or elders, how I treated other people. So there's like the whole relational side of that was extremely, I was so anxious around other people because I was a messy, chaotic extrovert. Hard to be a perfectionist when you're a messy, loud, clumsy, chaotic, talks with your hands, knocks stuff over, extrovert. So I was shamed for that behavior because my parents were very together, appropriate, nothing was like out of place. I was always just out of place. I was always out of place, and I was out of place with my family. I just didn't, that's not who they were, but that's who I was, okay? So there was a real shame about who I was. So that reinforced this message that I needed to be more perfect. I needed to be more appropriate and put together. And that's not who I was. And the more anxious I got about trying to be that way, I'm an extrovert, so my anxiety shows on the outside. So I got messier and more chaotic. And then I was just told I was embarrassing for them. So, okay. So that's one of the ways that I was raised in a performative environment. The second is that our house, I used to tell my mom this, and bless her, that woman used to clean until her fingers she had eczema, and my mother used to clean until her fingers bled. I know it's a saying, but my mom used to clean until her fingers bled. I used to tell my mom when I was younger, our house looked like nobody lived in it. It doesn't even look like anybody lives here. Like, that's the state of perfection. Now, she also came from trauma and extreme anxiety and perhaps OCD tendencies from her own upbringing of just fear, absolute fear. And so remember what I said about they'll do anything if they feel their world is chaotic and your life would be more perfect in order to create predictability. So for her, she created a literally OCD environment to create predictability, to try and quell and calm herself on the inside. Okay. So there was, I think my parents are both high achievers. They were both high achievers and in some subtle ways also driven by perfection. I also was both. Okay. But you have to understand the difference. Again, a high achiever is going for an approach goal. They are doing and pursuing things for the purpose of growth, learning, bettering, curiosity, and are far less attached, let me be clear, far less attached to failure than a perfectionist who is aiming for an unattainable standard of overachieving to avoid chaos, pain, failure, shame, blame, anything. And so the perfectionist generally is very insecure. The perfectionist does not have the internal resilience to navigate struggle or insecurity or even failure, God forbid. Like, failure is like death to a perfectionist. Failure to a high achiever may still be hard to manage, but their resilience and strength of character is able to take some of that struggle and failure and shift it into learning to go back to achieving. Okay? So this is character and environment. There's two prongs to this thing that goes on. Okay. So for me, I want to go back to the performative environment. Body image was very important to my parents. Growing up, I was literally a stick. I was super active. I was in all the athletics. I, was the soccer player and the track and field and the basketball and the, all the things. Because I loved achieving. But let me be really clear with you about something. I sought achievement as a means to garner just a breadcrumb of positive reinforcement, acknowledgement, anything that didn't feel sharp and cruel. So yes, I was a high achiever and I was a smart student and I was very athletic, but make no mistake about it. I was also doing those things because in my home environment, there was literally no positive reinforcement. There was normal, like on a scale of super positive, yay, you're amazing, we love you, blah, blah, blah. And then there's like, you're a piece of S, and like, I grew up in an environment where there was nothing. So the middle ground of like, man, okay, that's okay, sure, that's normal, that's just what we expect. From this to here, to all the negative stuff. There was never anything from here to the positive side. All the awards I won, all of the, like I couldn't have won more awards in high school. There was no acknowledgement, there was no praise, there was no nothing. There was only this down to here. So yes, I was a high achiever, but I'm going to tell you for sure that a lot of it was perfectionism, because if it came to failure, I was afraid of failure. I didn't embrace failure as a means of learning, to correct, to regather, and then go back out and high achieve in a way that perhaps worked better for me. I took failure as a very personal cut because I did not have the character and resilience to absorb that struggle or failure. So as far as body image, sorry, I got off track. As far as body image goes, The minute I wasn't this stick thin, literally I was like so thin, I was a stick at 12 until I hit puberty. And then I gained weight, and it changed how I participated in a lot of sports, because most young girls that hit puberty, like my top track and field records were when I was 12, and I never bettered them because my body muscle mass changed and everything else, which is kind of normal for female bodies with hormones. However, that was when the really derogatory comments about my body started to come, about being fat, a fat pig. I was actually asked if I was pregnant because I gained like 20 pounds and started wearing baggy clothes and hiding my body because it was shameful. It was so painful to be in a body that garnered such negative, painful comments that I learned body hatred because of that. So at 12 years old, I started taking diet pills. I used my babysitting money, and I'd get on my bike and I'd ride to the mall, which was like 15-minute bike ride, 20-minute bike ride. And I would go in and buy diet pills at 12 years old. Because the minute I couldn't stay that stick figure, the pain of daily negative, derogatory, toxic comments that came at me, which biologically I had no control over. So I aimed for perfection and unattainable. And I actually developed an eating disorder for the next 14 years. A horrible relationship with food because I was never lovable enough. So this is what I want to let you know, okay, is that people can be born with high achieving, I'm just reading my notes here. People can be born with tendencies for high achieving, okay? But more often, there is a subtle hint of impossible standards, which is perfectionism. So even the high achiever, which is personality style and somewhat environment, can be prone to perfectionism because of the child's familial and social pressures. Okay, like parents who prize achievement above all else and criticize their children when they make mistakes. Now, I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm saying that is definitely what I received. I am saying this because I get messages from parents who are like, yeah, like all you do is talk about when kids are lazy and unmotivated, Allie. I got the opposite problem and I need to know how to help this. My child is like overachieving. So I want to tell you that this comes from from a place of anxiety. And I say this often in a lot of my talks and a lot of social media, but I'm going to say it again. We need to start normalizing struggle and failure as a rich part of growth and being human. We need to start normalizing struggle and failure as a rich part of learning and being human. When your child, who perhaps is a perfectionist or high achiever, maybe some of both, when they cannot be with failure, they cannot be with getting it wrong, being told they're wrong, not having control over their environment, and literally losing their ever-loving minds when all of a sudden they can't create that control in their environment and there's too much unpredictability, they lose their minds. So I'm going to tell you right now, as far as a signal, that's a perfectionist. That's an overachiever. That's not a high achiever. A high achiever is using an approach to something because they want for learning, growth, curiosity, etc. Okay? Perfectionism and overachieving is for the purpose of deeming themselves as worthy as a human being. And I hope you're getting this distinction. And it'd be, there's a lot of ways where you could say, well, no, Mike, if you are a high achiever or perhaps an overachiever, you may see your overachieving child as being just fine because you're looking through the lens of overachieving as well, even if it's not perfectionism, it was overachieving. So here's what I want you to say to your teenager, okay? Sorry, I need to stop hitting my camera. What I want you, Ali, stop touching. What I want you to do is start talking about all the times that you struggled. Literally, start talking about when my youngest was in his grade 12 year, okay, in his graduating year, and he wanted to go away to university. He'd made that clear. We're like, great. Okay. We spent an entire year. Now, this wasn't the first time we had done this, but during his grade 12 year, we made a really focused effort to do this. Every night at dinner, probably 3 or 4 times a week, because he was also very busy in sports. So 3 or 4 times a week when we'd have family dinner, my husband and I would talk about failure. We would talk about the times when we failed in university tests, where we failed exams, where we didn't study enough, and our own level of panic and insecurity in that, and how that felt, and the sickening, and then how we were afraid to tell our parents how we did, and because they were paying for university, and it was that's a big financial commitment. And so to tell your parent that you failed a test felt like we were taught that was so disrespectful. And so the fear that it led us to, and the behaviors and how it felt, we spent a year talking all about failure and normalizing struggle. And then what did we learn from that? How did we adjust? Did we adjust from that situation that we perhaps was in control, are in our control, or perhaps wasn't in our control? Okay. So start talking about struggle and failure and what you learned from it, what you wish you had known then, what do you know now? Did that situation enforce to you that you sucked and you weren't lovable or worthy? Or did that situation enforce to you that it was going to be okay? And maybe that particular thing, that topic, that subject, that sport, that whatever, just wasn't for you. And that's okay too. Start talking about it. Please normalize, because your perfectionist and your overachiever is avoiding failure and struggle like the plague. The minute that they can't control their environment, or they perceive they are wrong, they go into a tailspin. And that, my friends, is anxiety based in fear. And the only way to quell that anxiety based in fear is to make it normal, is to normalize it. That it is okay. We are here with you. You are safe. Because the brain tells, for someone who has high anxiety, which I can relate to, high anxiety when my environment feels too overwhelming, as in there's too many things to do on my list in my brain, or my environment feels like I'm not a neat freak. I like things tidy, but I'm not a neat freak. I'm also not a clean freak in certain ways if you look around my house. But anyway, when I hit that anxiety limit, when it's too much, I go into fear. And it's fear of retribution. There's a fear of, honestly for me, based on my environment of familiar upbringing, okay, the anxiety that I experience when my environment gets too chaotic, or I feel really overwhelmed and there's too much on my plate, is fear of retribution. Fear of that shaming messages coming back in that I suck, I'm not strong enough, I'm not capable enough, I'm weak, I'm stupid, I just don't deal with stress well, just all these messages, and then there is a very real fear as well of physical violence. That's the fear for me. So I believe I am a high achiever, but I am going to for sure tell you that the majority of my high achieving has had a twisted overachiever and perfectionism in it, based on fear of failure, fear of retribution, and an insecurity that says if I fail, I am unlovable. Because of being raised in a performative environment where what I achieved defined my worth and my value to others. So I don't know if this has been helpful for you or not, but I don't want to overrun. I know I talk a lot about teens who are lacking motivation and don't seem to do anything, which is it's the same anxiety, man. It's the same anxiety, same fear. It's just a different side of the coin. But we do need to pay some attention to our perfectionists and our overachievers. And parents are asking me, what do you do? Well, as I said, those are some of the things you do. Normalize pain and struggle. I also want you to begin affirming your child, not for their achievements. Stop. Don't ignore them, okay? Don't like ignore it. But I want you to do like a 80-20 rule. 80% of your affirmation to be who they are, their character traits, their curiosity, their caring, their funny, their quirks, their things that they find easy, their talents. Affirm who they are, their character, and please steer away from constantly affirming their performance, their external success markers, because you are unknowingly reinforcing that they just need to keep performing to feel lovable or worthy of your love. And their self-worth is completely tied into it. So affirm their character, who they are. If you're not sure how to do that, if you're here on Instagram, if you tap on my name and then the link in my bio and go to most requested articles, first one is 10 ways to build your teen self-confidence and esteem. Okay. So that's the first thing that you can do with that. The second thing, the first thing I talked about was normalize struggle and failure. The second thing was begin affirming who they are, like 80% of the time, and only 20% acknowledge the achievement, because you've got to change where their brain is focusing, because these beliefs, as Dr. Brené Brown has said, these beliefs are set up in adolescence. They're set up in adolescence. Okay. So there's that. I'd love for you to start to model taking on new things, trying new things that you suck at. So I started playing the piano again in COVID during the pandemic. Now, I grew up playing the piano, but I hadn't played the piano in years. And I decided I went back to, just before the pandemic, I went back to start playing the piano. And it was really hard because I knew how to do it at one time, and then I couldn't get my brain and my fingers to work, and it wasn't as easy. And that was a giant swallowing of image and stepping into courage. Are you willing to be courageous enough to do something that you know you suck at? Because for a perfectionist and an overachiever, that is going to be a challenge. So are you willing to try some things with your teen that show that you can step into sucking at something, even if it's like getting them to show you how to play their video game, getting them to show you, like, play the video. Of course you're going to suck at it. They're experts at it. You're going to suck at it. But when you show them it's okay to suck at it, it's okay to be a newbie, it's okay to learn new things and be terrible at it, you are making that safe for them. Okay? So that's another strategy that you can use. It's also talking about fear and anxiety, talk about it, name it. What does it feel like for you if you were an overachiever or a perfectionist? What does it feel like for you when you can't be the highest mark in the class? Because you see, part of this is masked by competitiveness. Whoo, Hannah, I was highly competitive as a child, which was perceived as being a high achiever, but it wasn't. It was part of my perfectionism, because if I wasn't the best, there was no amount of being the top, the best, the highest that seemed to garner any kind comments. So I just kept going higher and higher. And because participating in anything where I wasn't the winner or the highest reinforced the messages that I thought I heard, where I just wasn't worthy of any kind comments or affirmations or love and approval. Okay? So participate in something as a family, maybe, that has no winning. Like we used to, as a family, we used to put together Christmas boxes for homeless shelters or charities. And again, that's something you do as a family, but there's nothing, you're not winning. There's nothing to win. So participate in activities that aren't about winning. Like include your teenager with you in, even if it's cleaning the car. Places where perfectionism are fun and good, but there's no winning. That's a great place to help your overachiever or your perfectionist. Gardening, talk about the anxiety that forms when they can't win, when they aren't the best. Talk about how that feels and what does that feeling tell them they should do. Because that feeling, for every feeling, their brain creates a story, aka you suck and you're unlovable, just saying. So talk about that anxiety and that fear of not being the best, the highest mark, the whatever, and what is that emotion for them? If you don't already have the feeling wheel, please get it. You can get it via Instagram. If you tap on my name, then the link in my bio, and you go to free downloads, get the feeling wheel. It'll also give you 2 videos on how to use it, okay? Talk about and name that feeling of that's on the other side that they're trying to avoid. They are literally avoiding like the friggin' plague. Talk about that feeling. Give it a name. And what does it feel like in their body? What does that feeling, what's the story that feeling tells them? And then based on that story, what's the behavior they did? So they can start to bring awareness to how this cycle is perpetuating in their life. Even if it's not something that you believe that you have been part of, I want you to be open to seeing how parts and very subtle, all unconscious parts of this pattern have been set up perhaps in your life and are reappearing as a parent now of a higher an overachiever or a perfectionist. And the difference, again, a high achiever is aiming toward, that is an approach. An overachiever and perfectionist is avoiding. They are avoiding pain, shame, stories they've made up about, being normal. So I hope this has been helpful for you today. This is very, very real because I'm going to tell you right now, in my humble opinion, teenagers are more insecure than ever. They are more terrified of failure than ever. They have the lowest level of emotional vocabulary I have ever seen, and it has gotten worse in the last decade. They don't know how to explain their feelings. They don't know how to be with feelings. And so they just behave in a way to avoid them all by either not acting or overacting. So we can be part of this healing. We can be part of turning this around. It takes conscious effort, it takes consistency, and it takes curiosity and awareness. Because nobody is perfect. Nobody is. So let's at least own it and have it show our kids that it doesn't define our value. It doesn't make us less lovable. And that they are always going to be fully loved by you, even when you don't agree with their choices. And let's be careful of overlaying a moral lens of someone's achievements, because achievements are not moral. Killing someone, that's immoral. That's a moral judgment. Their grades, their achievements, that's not moral. That's not morality. That's righteousness. It's not morality. So let's start being really clear about that. Okay, thanks so much for joining me today. Again, if you're here on Instagram, tap the follow. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I would love to hear your comments. And I will see you on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time on TikTok at Allie Payne, and on Thursdays here on Instagram, 11 a.m. Pacific time at Allie Payne, talking about all things parenting. Bye, everybody.